13 minutes, 42 seconds past 8 on a Tuesday morning. That's where my day began slipping through my hands. I was already late, heart racing, keys in one hand, a to-do list in the other, thinking about a $3,000 job that could keep my electrical business afloat. I swung open the back gate to my grandmother's yard and walked straight into a 6-foot privacy fence that hadn't been there the night before. Not a temporary barrier, a finished, brutal wall of cedar built around my whole property while I slept. I nearly broke my nose on the cedar post. For a few stunned seconds I stood there and let the absurdity wash over me. This wasn't a neighborly dispute or a prank. It was deliberate, targeted, and, I'd learn soon enough, perfectly planned. On the other side of that fence was Delilah Thornfield, HOA president, real estate agent, and the kind of woman who believes yard signs are acts of treason. She measures grass with a ruler. She fines people $500 for the wrong mailbox color. She drives a white BMW that looks like an armored car for vanity. She'd turned my grandmother's house, the one I'd inherited and planned to renovate as a memorial and a way to rebuild, into her personal chessboard. My story didn't start with the fence. It started months earlier, with a will and a sun-fated deed. 6 months ago I was Garrett Mills, 45 years old, an electrician with a life in pieces, a divorce that took the house, the dog, half my business, and left me with bills and a stubborn determination to start over. My grandmother leaving me her 1940s Craftsman in Willowbrook Estates felt like a gift and an assignment: fix it, flip it, rebuild. The property sat on 3/4 of an acre, original farmland, old-growth trees, a shed that predated HOA rules by decades. I pictured restoring the deck, finishing a modest bathroom, taking 2 steps forward for every stumble behind me. Delilah made sure nothing stayed modest for long. She showed up the first week I moved in, perfume and designer heels announcing her like bad news. No hello, no welcome, just a clipboard and a certified letter: structure setback violations. The shed, built in 1963 and grandfathered into every code, suddenly needed to be removed. When I laughed at the idea, she smiled a smile that could freeze a campfire and told me rules were rules. After she left, I did what anyone would do: I dug. That's when I found out she'd been showing my property to buyers for months. That's when I started noticing odd things: wellness checks left on my doorstep, anonymous complaints appearing in city records, an impound notice for my electrician van at 6 in the morning after an emergency HOA vote held at 9 the night before. The vote had exactly 4 people present. The towing company? Thornfield Recovery Services. The owner? Somebody close to Delilah, who answered the phone with proud efficiency. I installed cameras after that. I'm an electrician, I have a wiring habit. The footage was ugly and beautiful at the same time. There she was, nighttime photos under floodlights, phone calls from her BMW, the tow truck waiting around the corner. She'd orchestrated it like a military operation. But what she didn't count on was evidence. HOAs can't retroactively criminalize grandfathered uses, and when I called a lawyer we discovered more than petty overreach, we discovered a pattern. It escalated. I posted the footage and the story on our neighborhood Facebook group. My phone exploded with messages. Mrs. Chen warned me she'd been fined $1,200 for an unapproved bird feeder that had sat on her porch for 8 years. Other neighbors came forward, similar stories, a shared script of harassment aimed at people without the time or money to fight. While I was digging through violation histories, I found delicious hypocrisy. Delilah's own property violated the rules she enforced: a fountain against noise ordinances, a pool house built without approvals, her BMW regularly blocking sidewalks. The same woman preaching standards had a history of bending rules to suit herself. Instead of retreating, I began a counterattack. I called every contractor listed in Delilah's files and offered free electrical inspections. Within days I uncovered something uglier: families who'd been coerced into paying for emergency repairs from companies connected to Delilah. Those contractors paid referral fees, Delilah collected. When I exposed this, posting recordings and the names of people who'd been scammed into unnecessary repairs, the harassment intensified. The city inspector came to my door with a clipboard thicker than a Stephen King novel: following anonymous safety complaints. Permits went missing from the city computer. Clients canceled jobs after hazy warnings about unsafe practices echoed into their voicemail. Then came the recording that made lawyers smile. My friend Jake recorded a safety warning call. It was Delilah's voice, saccharine and precise. Garrett Mills has been cited for multiple violations. We have an electrician we recommend. The recommended electrician? Her brother-in-law, expensive and awful. That call wasn't just mean, it was interference. Business interference is a tort, and my attorney smelled blood. Delilah didn't limit herself to administrative sabotage. She upped the game to criminality. She began showing my property to buyers without permission, staging marketing shots as if the house were already hers. Surveyor stakes started appearing, orange tombstones that foreshadowed a siege. A property management LLC, another shell company linked to Delilah, sent crews that surveyed and marked routes for community access improvements. In the night, under floodlights, they came and built. Where there had been access to the road now stood a 6-foot wall. The only exit led across an adjoining lot Delilah's LLC had quietly bought months earlier. She had built herself a choke point, a medieval gatekeeper guarding my life and my livelihood. I called the police for trespass and documented. Officers arrived and, to their credit, saw past Delilah's performance. The fence violated tons of municipal codes, obstructed postal service, and created fire hazards. The fire marshal's face tightened. In its own way, Delilah had slipped. She'd created not just an obstruction, but federal violations. I started invoking things I'd never expected to need: county records, easement law, federal jurisdiction. With more digging in the county recorder's office, buried in my grandmother's manila envelope marked property rights, important, I found the biggest weapon we'd wield, a 1943 perpetual access easement. In black and white legalese, my grandmother had retained the right to cross surrounding properties for farm equipment, livestock, and agricultural operations, and that right ran with the land in perpetuity. That paper changed everything. Perpetual easements are legal gold. They can trump later HOA rules. They allow real, reasonable use that can include temporary structures and utilities. The easement ran right through Delilah's choke lot. She'd literally bought herself an expensive driveway and, more importantly, she'd built her empire on the false assumption that she could bully anyone out of their rights. I had precedents and proof. I had photographic logs and timestamps, witness affidavits, and now a deed that said I could legally cross her property, with equipment if necessary. My team assembled fast. Rebecca Santos, a property rights attorney with a reputation for turning HOA tyrants into cautionary tales, read the deed and smiled like a woman who liked fighting injustices for breakfast. Miguel Torres, a surveyor, mapped the easement and confirmed my case. The fence crossed the easement by 15 feet. Jake volunteered his heavy equipment crew for peaceful fence removal, and Tommy promised portable generators and security lighting. We had a strategy that balanced legal armor with tactical timing: file emergency motions to enforce the easement, demand fence removal, countersue for business interference and emotional distress, and prepare punitive damages large enough to make her think twice. We also went community first. I reached out to neighbors Delilah had targeted. Private meetings, coffee at Mrs. Chen's house, secure channels outside her surveillance network. Miguel's survey cleared the legal path, Rebecca's motions cleared procedural obstacles. I installed cameras that recorded everything in timestamped clarity: midnight crews, logbooks, phone calls. We documented the tow truck operations, the anonymous tip lines, the people showing up at odd hours. The pattern became unmistakable. Delilah had been running a racket of manufactured violations, predatory buyouts, and referral kickbacks for years. She got desperate. She tried bribery first, or what she hoped would look like mercy. She knocked on my door with a manila envelope. A cash offer, $150,000, which was $50,000 over market. No inspections, close in 2 weeks. I asked who the buyer was: private investor. My attorney had his PI trace it and it led right back to another Delilah LLC. She wanted my house in any way she could get it, even if she had to fake urgency and then buy it with borrowed money. I declined. When bribery didn't work, she turned violent in her tactics. Utilities were tampered with, bills mixed and transferred, gas companies claimed meter tampering, water services suddenly flagged for non-payment after charges that seemed to originate from someone else. My van suffered attempted sabotage. Graffiti and vandalism cropped up. Fake social media accounts smeared my name. She organized emergency HOA meetings that smeared me as a danger to the community. Flyers arrived on every doorstep with my face and dire warnings. It was all coordinated and aggressive. But what dug the knife deepest into her operation was arrogance. She used the mail, wire transfers, and local government in ways that created bridges into interstate commerce and federal jurisdiction. Once the pattern of mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy across jurisdictional lines appeared, Rebecca and our team talked to federal authorities. RICO laws, the ones most people think only apply to organized crime, exist to cover this kind of organized, predatory scheme. And organized it was. The FBI opened an investigation. Local reporters showed up. My Facebook post had gone viral, there were hashtags and millions of views, and suddenly 15 families were no longer willing to be quiet. Each had variations on the same story: violated, pressured, sold out, alone. Under public pressure and with evidence in hand, recordings of Delilah coordinating sabotage, financial records showing illegal referral fees, property transactions tied to shell companies, things started to move quickly. Search warrants were issued. The building inspector who'd been showing up at inconvenient times was arrested during a city council meeting. He was handcuffed there in front of a packed chamber. The mayor and 2 council members got escorted out by federal marshals. The sense of shock in that room was cinematic. Delilah tried to manufacture more chaos. Threats were left on my voicemail. Someone tried to sabotage my electrical van. Nighttime crews vandalized property. But now we had more than my cameras. We had forensic audits, evident money trails, bank records, and testimony from people who'd been bought, intimidated, or bullied into silence for years. The town that had once whispered about Delilah's temper suddenly had lawsuits, federal indictments, and a televised community outrage. When the emergency city council meeting turned into a kind of public trial, I stood up and laid the deed on the podium like a talisman. I told everyone that my grandmother's easement could have shut this whole thing down on day one. I also said I hadn't wanted to trade one injustice for another. I'd wanted to expose a system that had preyed on people for years. Rebecca called Exhibit A, audio of Delilah orchestrating sabotage, surveillance video of the midnight fence crew, financial spreadsheets showing $340,000 in missing HOA funds and illegal kickbacks. The footage looped on the projection screen while federal agents watched and took notes. The crowd gasped. The building inspector, once handcuffed, sat stunned as the evidence unfolded. The fallout was immediate. Search warrants, asset freezes, license suspensions. Her LLCs defaulted on loans, creditors came knocking. Her BMW was repossessed on live TV as a reporter asked why she'd been issuing fines while stealing from her own HOA. The humiliation was public and the criminal exposure was comprehensive: RICO, mail fraud, wire fraud, civil rights violations under color of law, all the things that take people to federal court with the weight of decades in prison as a possible sentence. Outside the council chambers, heavy equipment crews, operating within the legal framework we'd fought to assert, removed the illegal fence live on camera. I drove my van through the gap to thunderous applause from neighbors who had felt trapped and silenced for far too long. Mrs. Chen hugged me until I thought my ribs would cave. People I'd only nod to on the street were in tears, telling us about the bills and blackmail and sleepless nights Delilah had caused. Families who'd sold under pressure got their fines refunded. Emergency injunctions restored access. The community voted in a new board that promised transparency, meeting minutes posted online, audited books, clear appeal processes. The legal machinery kept grinding. RICO indictments and related charges followed: arrests, trials, asset seizures. Delilah's real estate license was revoked, her personal bankruptcy revealed assets she'd tried to hide, and a federal jury handed down sentences and restitution orders that felt, in a small way, like justice. The class action recovered millions for victims. The seized assets funded neighborhood improvements and legal aid. We established a scholarship fund in my grandmother's name for law students who study property rights, and we turned the former HOA office into a community resource center and garden. Where there had once been suspicion and surveillance, there were now picnics and kids playing under string lights. It wasn't instant peace. The damage Delilah did to people's finances and trust took time to repair. My renovation happened on a staggered schedule, between hearings and testimony. I slept with a phone by the bed and cameras on the eaves for months. But the house became what I'd wanted, a labor of love. Rebecca and our relationship began as an attorney and client and grew into something more complex and human. Some battles bond you in ways that slow, sunny days never do. The biggest lesson I learned is simple: paperwork matters. Deeds, easements, old covenants, legal fossils of a more practical time, can protect you in ways you don't realize until you need them. Record everything. Film the late-night activity, keep copies of every letter, and don't underestimate the power of neighbors who know more than they say. Bullies thrive on isolation and ignorance. When 15 families finally spoke, the network that had profited from fear unraveled. Now, months later, Willowbrook feels different. Property values stabilized, transparency returned, and the people who remained found community in a way that had nothing to do with covenant compliance and everything to do with mutual respect. The annual Freedom Fence Festival started as a joke and turned into a fundraiser for legal aid. Documentary filmmakers came, won awards, and some of what we went through became a template for other communities facing similar abuse. I even got a call from a homeowner in Texas facing a scheme that smelled eerily like Delilah's. We sent a binder, a list of trusted lawyers, and a bus of volunteers. What started as one man's attempt to rebuild his life turned into a playbook for resistance. So here's the takeaway I always end with when someone asks what they should do if they see red flags. First, check your deeds and any old covenants for rights that precede HOA rules. Second, document everything, every call, every knock, every wasted 90-minute inspection. Third, don't fight alone. Organize discreetly and get lawyers who understand not just property law but the federal hooks that turn a local racket into a federal case. And finally, don't underestimate how powerful a community can be when it stops being afraid. My grandmother's garden still smells like lavender in the evenings. Sometimes I park my van at the curb and sit on the porch and listen to kids running through the community garden where Delilah's office once stood. There's a scholarship plaque in the entryway now, and sometimes, when I'm not wiring a hot line or fixing a neighbor's porch light for free, I tell the story to anyone who'll sit for a cup of coffee. If you're hearing this because you've been through an HOA nightmare, or you suspect someone is playing fast and loose with the rules, I'll say this plainly: write it down, hold your paper like a talisman, and don't let fear make your decisions for you. Bullies count on silence. When you break it, they often crumble on their own. And if you enjoyed watching Delilah Thornfield get what she deserved, if you felt that rush when power meets accountability, consider hitting subscribe. Next week there's more: a corrupt mayor who tried to steal a neighborhood with fake eminent domain, and a mechanic who unearthed a 150-year-old treaty that blew a $50 million scheme wide open. But that's another story. For now, I'll close the gate, the legal one, the community one, and keep the cameras rolling. Because you never know when the next stranger will wake up enclosed by someone else's ambition. And when that happens, it helps to have friends who keep their hammers and deeds handy. Every neighborhood has its secrets, and every Karen leaves her mark. If you love true HOA stories like this, make sure to watch more on our channel, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life neighborhood drama. Thank you.